Hello one and all, it's Saturday, and so that means it's time for me to talk about an episode of an animated superhero television show. Today I am talking about the third episode of the Legion of Superheroes animated series. This episode is titled Legacy. I enjoyed the first episode of this series more or less, with reservations about elements of the episode that just did not work. And the second episode I thought was very well done, and definitely a step in the right direction. So even though the night is still young, so to speak, this episode was something of a disappointment, and I definitely hope the quality of the episode and the enjoyment level is not indicative of what is to come later on with this series. The premise is that Superboy rescues a lady named Alexis. She's the richest girl in the galaxy, and she's a spoiled brat. We're not told outright, but this is supposed to be the 31st century version of Lex Luthor. She's got the orange hair, she's rich, she has her own company, she is a super smart inventor, and she has a friendship with Superboy. So basically a synthesis of all of the elements of several different Lexes from multiple versions of him. So Superboy rescues Lady Lex, and she immediately decides that she wants to be his friend. This gets in the way of Superboy's Legion duties a couple of times, and when Superboy finally decides to ignore Alexis in order to attend to Legion business, Alexis decides that she will help the Scavengers, a team of villains the Legion has been hunting down in this episode, and she will eliminate the Legion. Once she's done this, in theory, she can have Superboy all to herself. A fight ensues, Superboy chooses the Legion over Alexis, and then Alexis is arrested after losing her hair to further hammer home the point that she is Lex Luthor. So I get that this is only a 22-minute episode, and that means there's just not a whole lot of time for a given story to develop in such a short space. But the friendship between Alexis and Superboy here never felt real to me. It just sort of happens in the blink and you miss it kind of way. In fact, Alexis invites Superboy to a party without even introducing herself. Yeah, Superboy knows her name, but only because Phantom Girl was creepily looking at a picture of her anyway, and the Legion was there to explain who this girl was. As far as Alexis knew, Superboy had no idea who she was. Now, there's no easy way to handle this unless the episode removed all of the stuff with the Scavengers to make more room for the Alexis and Superboy friendship. But that wouldn't happen in a cartoon aimed at children who want to see good guys punching bad guys, which is the purpose that the scavenger stuff is in this episode for about 2/3 of the episode. Now, just for the record, I would say the best way to handle the Alexis-Superboy friendship here would be to remove a lot of the stuff with the Scavengers. We don't know anything about them except, well, they scavenge. We have no concept of their ideology, and adding weapons to your arsenal is not an ideology. Having no motivations or reasons for doing what they are doing makes the Scavengers very boring, and it's abundantly apparent that the only reason they are in this episode is to remind people that this is a superhero television show that is predominantly aimed at having action. Outside of the thrust of this episode not really being executed in a great way, a huge problem I have with this episode is that everyone is an unlikable jerk. Witness: Alexis, Superboy, and Brainiac 5. Alexis is obvious. She's a spoiled brat who thinks that she is more important than everyone else, and she even tries to commit murder to make sure Superboy only spends time with her. But Superboy and Brainiac, they're supposed to be the good guys. If they're just as unlikable as the villain of this episode, there's a problem, right? Now, maybe I'm not being fair. Superboy does shape up by the end of the episode, so that's something, but gee whiz, that's still not great. Superboy's whole thing in this episode is that he doesn't have any friends, and even in the Legion, all of his time is spent fighting crime. Which, you chose to stay in the 31st century, Superboy, so that one's all on you. I do get that it must be hard for Superboy to fit in and just have a fun, normal friendship with the rest of the Legionnaires, being that this team idolized Superboy, and he now has to live up to their expectations, when he's just not at that place yet. That must be tough. So I get that that would be very hard for a kid to deal with. But I'm not even sure if I buy this as being much of a problem for Superboy in this setting. At this point, I really don't know how long Superboy's been in the future, but I'm pretty sure he hasn't been on missions for the whole time that he's been there. And I'm pretty sure the Legion is big enough that Superboy is not on every single Legion mission. So this sort of feels like a contrived place to put Superboy in at the beginning of the episode just to manufacture some drama. Don't get me wrong, the idea that Superboy feels just as much like an outsider in the future as he did at home in Smallville is a good one, but this episode doesn't really do anything with it, other than use this to get Superboy to hang out with Alexis. After he's met her, this whole subplot is basically ignored. And then there's Brainiac 5. Brainy has this weird lusty relationship with Superboy, which again could have been something to work with, considering that in this same episode, Superboy briefly touches on how it's hard to make friends in this time period. Brainiac 5 could have been the representation of the Legion still idolizing Superboy and thinking of him as the legend Superman and not as their friend and teammate. And he definitely seems to look up to Superboy, but he really seems more like the jealous girlfriend who gets all whiny when you choose to spend your time with someone else. Which, now that I think about it, he's not all that different from Alexis. But my big problem with Brainy acting this way is that none of this is resolved. This episode feels really incomplete without some scene of Superboy and Brainiac 5 going and hanging out at a ball game or something. Something to show that Superboy does value Brainiac 5 as a friend and teammate, as his actions suggested otherwise earlier in the episode, and something to show that Brainiac 5 doesn't need to be so stiff and formal all the time, as his actions in this episode suggested that he definitely is, and can still have a friendship with one of his teammates, which is what Superboy wants much more than being on duty fighting with the guys. I guess it's possible that this is tackled in a later episode, but that's not my problem. I'm just reviewing this episode, and as such, this episode feels like it needed another 30 seconds added onto it. Now, you might say that before the big throwdown with Alexis, that Brainy and Superboy resolved their argument from before, but this feels more like Brainy is still upset with Superboy, but just doesn't want to talk about it, and so he pretends like everything is okay. Like I say, this could have been resolved and it wouldn't have even taken very much time to fix. But getting back to everyone being unlikable, the thing is, there's no rule anywhere that says that characters absolutely must be likable. If every character was likable, there wouldn't be very much conflict, and conflict drives stories, so there has to be a little bit of jerkery going on with the characters. But to take it too far risks losing people like me who are not at all interested in experiencing stories where literally every character is an unlikable jerky pants. Granted, I could be a very small minority here. I didn't used to be this way, but I've become this person who, when I experience stories, I look at the characters, and I determine that if the character is just a crappy human being, then I will have no reason to want to continue with that story. This is why, despite protests from many people that I know, I don't give a crap about the Big Bang Theory or Deadpool. So, if Superboy is being an idiot who puts hanging out with some chick he doesn't even know before being there for his friends, and Brainy and Alexis are both jealous psychotic girlfriends, then that makes me want to root for the black hole that will swallow all of these people and end the episode prematurely. That could just be me, though. So after Alexis attacks the Legion with the help of the scavengers, she gives another one of her fake apologies, and then she starts blasting Superboy with a heat ray or something. This seems weird because Superboy isn't being hurt at all, and he even calls her on this. So Superboy decides to walk towards the heat ray device, and then that weird thing where all of the energy becomes concentrated and intensified blows up the robot that she is hiding in. That happens, and Superboy is suddenly worried. What did you think was going to happen when you walked toward the robot, bringing the energy toward her? And from the wreckage of the robot, Alexis is now bald. Now, this is just weird. I get that this episode is trying to do an homage to the Silver Age origin/reason why Lex Luthor is bald. In the late 1960s, early 70s, there was an issue of Superman that explained that when he was a child, Lex had made some chemical that would help Superboy become immune to kryptonite. But he accidentally caused a fire, and the chemical somehow caused him to lose all of his hair, and he blamed Superboy for this. So what we have here is that Alexis is doing something, and she loses her hair as a result, and she blames Superboy. But the difference here is that Superboy kinda is to blame. I mean, I'm no superhero, so I don't think I could immediately tell you what you should do if you are basically immortal and you are being blasted by energy from a robot. But I am certain that you do not walk toward the robot, making the energy more concentrated and intensified. But furthermore, how exactly does Alexis lose her hair? I mean, she is like completely bald, as if a razor was taken to her scalp. An explosion doesn't really do that, you know. And we see with a little end of the episode stinger that Alexis's hair is growing back slowly while she's in prison. So this isn't something like with Lex Luthor where the chemicals made him permanently bald. This is just a normal explosion that somehow baldens Alexis just the once. Oh well, I guess I'm nitpicking at this point. But wait! Something else I don't like. This episode acts like it's setting up Alexis to be a future villain for the Legion of Superheroes, but Alexis doesn't ever really show up again in any important way. According to the Wikipedia, she does show up in a cameo later on, but she definitely doesn't ever fight the Legion again, as this episode would have you believe. Which, if this episode was bad, but had to exist in order to set up better episodes using this girl as a villain, that'd be fine, I guess. But this isn't even that. This is just an episode that is not that great, which is pretending like it will matter later on, and then it doesn't. I will say that this episode does have some pretty amusing references, which, if you're into the comics, you'll probably enjoy. At one point, Alexis steals a bike from a guy who looks a lot like Lobo. When Alexis and Superboy are at a restaurant, one of the lamps on the table looks like the headquarters for the Legion of Doom from Super Friends. And I was quite surprised that at the beginning of the episode, while Alexis is in a robot suit, she is speaking with her robot butler, and this dichotomy between the two definitely feels like the Iron Man-Jarvis relationship that would become a thing 2 years later in the first Iron Man movie. So sort of a pre-reference there, I guess. But overall, this episode just doesn't do it for me. I do hope that this is just a minor setback, and that the series can get itself righted, and soon. So yeah, this episode, not the best. I do hope this more negative review of this episode did not scare you away from coming back for a review of another episode in 2 weeks. But before that, I've got videos coming at you every day of the week, so be sure to come back for all of that. Until then, I'll see you guys later.